A divine manifestation who hath extolled and magnified the one true God, exalted be his glory, who hath borne witness to his knowledge and confessed that his essence is sanctified above all things and exalted beyond every comparison. Such a manifestation hath been called at various times a worshipper of the sun or a fire worshipper. How numerous are those sublime manifestations and revealers of the divine, of whose stations the people remain wholly unaware, of whose grace they are utterly deprived, nay, God forbid, whom they curse and revile. Baha'u'llah.
So today we're happy to have Dr. Sepideh Taheri, and her topic is Zoroastrianism and the Bahá'í Faith. Sepideh Taheri has been serving as a pediatrician and associate professor at Western University in London, Canada since 2014, where she combines clinical work with teaching and research. Previously, she was a consultant pediatrician and honorary senior clinical lecturer at the Royal Hospital for Sick Children and at the University of Edinburgh. She has a special interest in the areas of health, advancement of women, and comparative religion. She's conducted many courses and lectured widely on these and other topics. So with that, I'll hand it off to Dr. Taheri.
Thank you very much, Paimane, for giving me the opportunity to share with you some remarks on a topic that is often less known by particularly Western audiences. So the organizers asked me to talk about Zoroastrian religion and the Baha'i faith. I thought we would start, although we had a beautiful prayer said already, but I thought we could listen to a Zoroastrian prayer that is called Ashem Vohu. And it says, righteousness is the best good, and it is happiness. Happiness is to her or him who is righteous for the sake of the best righteousness.
عشویی بهترین نعمت است. عشویی خوشبختی از آن کسی است که خواستار بهترین عشویی باشد. ایدون باد ایدون تر از چنین باد چنین تر.
Okay, so that was an example of a Zoroastrian prayer. Okay, so before we get into the subject matter per se, I wanted to share with you some premises of this discussion, because there may be many people here who may not have any familiarity either with any spiritual, any aspects of our spiritual heritage, or indeed with any religion per se. So these premises, the most important of them is that human nature is essentially spiritual in character. And what we mean by that is that human beings have been endowed with intelligible rather than sensible powers, which all the animals also possess, and we possess similar to them. But in addition to the sensible, tangible powers of the natural world, of the lower kingdoms of mineral, vegetable, and animal, human beings have been endowed with certain powers, such as intellection, the power to create, the power of free will, the power of transcendence and transcending above physical reality, the power of immortality, the power to love where it is not normal or natural to love. These are all summed up in what we call the human spirit. So we have been endowed with these spiritual or intelligible or metaphysical powers which distinguish us from other beings on earth and in creation indeed. And the next aspect of these powers is that these potentialities and capacities and powers are latent within human beings at birth. So they are not immediately obvious, and we develop them gradually throughout our lives. However, the development or the appearance of these potentialities depend entirely on training, on education, in order to realize them. And without that training and education, it is impossible for us to develop these powers, particularly in a positive way. And so the second premise of our discussion is that it is absolutely indispensable that human beings receive the proper type of training or education from an all-knowing and competent educator, so that we can be trained to develop our potentialities for the betterment of ourselves and of the world. And so Baha'u'llah says, men by men is the generic word of men and women. So all human beings at all times and under all conditions stand in need of one to exhort them, guide them, and to instruct and teach them. And he goes on to say that therefore, for this reason, he, that is the Creator, hath sent forth his messengers, his prophets and chosen ones, that they might acquaint the people with the divine purpose underlying the revelation of books, that means the holy books, and of raising up of messengers, and that everyone may become aware of the trust of God, which is latent in the reality of every soul. This is a representation of some of the aspects, some of the divine revelations, some of the spiritual heritage of humankind that has appeared at various points in time throughout our known history. And even before our known history, we have had these educators appearing to us in the form of these messengers or prophets or sacred fires, whatever you want to call them, divine physicians that have helped to train us, helped us to get civilized and to carry forward this ever advancing civilization. And the vision of human nature and purpose of life is therefore, from the Baha'i point of view, that we may work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. And this process of divine revelation is therefore an indispensable and inseparable dimension of existence. Because these manifestations of God, as they are often called in Baha'i phraseology, are like sun rays, which emanate from the sun and they impart to the human kingdom, just like the physical sun imparts its rays to the seeds so that they can actually become fruit-bearing trees. These manifestations of God also bring to us the absolutely necessary energy and light and guidance that is essential and indispensable for our not only existence, but also for our progress. And taking this analogy a little further, is that when the Son of Truth, which is a term used for these divine educators, these luminaries that have come to us from time immemorial, when these luminaries appear, they have two general effects in the world. They exert two aspects of their influence, just like the appearance of the sun, of the physical sun. One is their specific effect on those receptive individuals who initially, in the first stages of the dawn of that Son of Truth, become conscious of the source of this new springtime, this new spiritual springtime that has appeared. And they become transformed into a new race of human beings that are imbued with a new set of values. And they start building a new civilization, often pretty much invariably on the back of a crumbling civilization that has forgotten these values and has been outdated. And they start building these communities with these new values. And on the other hand, the appearance of these manifestations of God, these sons of truth, also exerts a universal effect on all the world, which generally is unconscious of the source of this new springtime, this revolution that is happening within the minds and hearts of people. And the generality of the human race becomes so enlightened and so inspired unconsciously of this new springtime, of the energies released by the advent of this new springtime, that advances are made in social thought, in sciences, in social sciences, in scientific advancement, etc. And in the course of several centuries, these two processes, the specific effect and the universal effect, these two processes converge in giving rise to what we call civilizations, which have marked our history periodically. And the third premise that I'd like us to specifically remember and reflect upon is the fact that our human societies have advanced through a process of evolution, and that all human beings have been created to carry forward an ever advancing civilization, that we are not in a state of stasis or stagnation, but we are continually evolving. And this process of evolution has taken the same sort of process that each of us goes through in our growth to maturity. So we have gone through stages of infancy, of various stages of childhood. Then we are going through the most difficult period of our adolescence and about to attain our collective maturity. And the Baha'i teachings tell us that human evolution has taken various different forms. So we have our individual evolution, as I described. We have had the physical evolution of the human race through various stages of its of change and transformation, but also we have gone through a collective process of evolution, which not only encompasses social progress, but also spiritual progress in the way that we have been able to manifest these in society and in individuals and in our identity. And the implications of understanding this process of evolution is extremely crucial for us to be able to go forward as a society. It is only when we understand this unifying nature of human beings, of human nature and society, that we can build, hope to ever build a world civilization that is fit for us and our children to inherit. So human physical evolution, of course, has taken place. And this is just a pictorial representation of that aspect of spiritual evolution that I talked about in terms of advancement of social thought and human capacity, but that also socially we have evolved ever more greater levels of complexity in the social organization of the planet. So initially we had family units largely abiding in caves and as isolated units. Then through further stages, we developed tribes when several families got together, and then these evolved gradually into city-states, generally formed around agricultural units around rivers. And then these city-states evolved through thousands of years into what we call modern nation states. But it has become very clear to most thinkers today that nation building, as we have known it in the past centuries, has come to an end, and that we are inevitably moving towards the next stage of our social evolution in terms of the social organization of the planet, and that is that of world unity, which is commensurate and contemporaneous with the reaching of the stage of wisdom or maturity within our social, within our spiritual evolution. So, and we are at this time in this red hot, very difficult period of our adolescence, which is where we're really trying to find our real identity as human beings that inhabit a common planetary home. And so this premise that Baha'u'llah describes, that divine revelation is the motive power of civilization, is what we're going to consider in a moment or two when we discuss the Zoroastrian faith in particular. But this premise applies to every aspect of our history. So he says that there can be no doubt whatever that the peoples of the world, of whatever race or religion, derive their inspiration from one heavenly source and are the subjects of one God. So, if you ever found yourself or find yourself in Manhattan, take a walk over to the East 25th Street and Madison Avenue, go to the south side of the building on 25th Street and look up. You'll see a beautiful old Beaux Arts Renaissance Revival building that houses the Appellate Division of New York's Supreme Court. And at the top of the building, grouped with other sculptures representing the world's historical, religious, and legendary lawgivers, you will definitely notice a towering sculpture of the ancient Persian prophet Zoroaster. Few Westerners ever have known about Zoroaster, who lived in Eastern Persia, now Iran and Afghanistan, more than a millennium before Christ, probably sometimes during the period between 1400 to 1200 before Christ, although some historians propose much earlier dates. So the date of the exact date of the appearance of Zoroaster is a matter of controversy between historians. Like many ancient faiths, the origin and even the original teachings of Zoroastrianism are now lost and obscure. Few Zoroastrians now exist, probably less than a few 100,000 in the world today, because only the descendants of Zoroastrians can be considered as believers. We know very few facts about Zoroastrianism's prophet founder Zarathustra, known as Zoroaster in the West, or Zartusht in the original Persian. Followers passed down the teachings of Zoroaster to successive generations for probably over 1,000 years before they were finally written down and incorporated into scripture known as the Avesta. Apparently, when they were written down, only a few copies were made. These were then subsequently lost or destroyed in the ensuing attacks of Arabs, Turks, and Mongols. The oldest copy in existence dates from 1323 AD, so that's Annum Domini, so after the birth of Christ, and great scholarly debate surrounds the authenticity of this scripture. So we have to keep in mind these facts when we are discussing details about the Zoroastrian religions. Now, it's very interesting that Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, has praised and honored Zoroaster, thereby immortalizing his name and memory. So speaking about Baha'u'llah, we'll talk about a little bit later about the relationship between the Baha'i Faith and Zoroastrianism. But basically, the Baha'i Faith and its founder, Baha'u'llah, meaning the glory of God, claim to be the fulfillment of all of the great religious prophecies of the past. The Baha'i teachings universalize, renew, and expand Zoroaster's sublime teachings and ethics, as restated and reconfigured in the Baha'i scriptures and in the Baha'i calendar, which has strong affinities with Zoroastrian calendar, and in Baha'i life and service to humanity. And as a direct result of this, the Baha'is worldwide highly honor and respect the prophet Zoroaster. So, as you see here, Baha'u'llah, in a tablet that is that we will later refer to one of the Zoroastrian leaders in his time, in the late 1800s, says that those who have appeared at God's behest, that is, these manifestations of God with a capital H, capital T, have been entrusted with the guidance and education of all people. The Zoroastrian fire temples of the world, of which this is an example in Yazd in Iran, stand as eloquent testimony to this truth. In their time, they summoned with burning zeal all the inhabitants of the earth to him who is the spirit of purity, which is a title that is given to Zoroaster in not only the Baha'i teachings, but in Zoroastrian religion. The essence of the Zoroastrian teachings are here, as you see: righteous thoughts, righteous words, and righteous deeds. And this is the symbol of the of Zoroaster, of the angel, of the Holy Spirit that has brought these teachings to us. And you will find many Zoroastrians wearing that symbol. And the universal effect of the Zoroastrian religion is the appearance, in fact, of the ancient Persian civilization, which in fact was the first just government in the world. And I have so much to talk about this, but it just would not fit into this, into this little session that we have, this hour-long or maximum hour-long session that we have. Suffice it to say, there are even TED Talks given quite recently by eminent people such as the curator of the British Museum about the Persian Empire and the wisdom of its founder, Cyrus the Great. This is a map of the Persian Empire at its greatest extent that you can see going right into the borders of Greece, well into Europe, into modern-day Armenia, into all of Central Asia, and well into the borders of India, as you can see. And this is the Persian Gulf, this is the Caspian Sea, and all of these areas were governed by this first government of the world, just government, and in fact the first government in the world. And the basis of this, the sort of foundation of it, was in this area in Persepolis and Pasargad, in what is now southern Persia. And Cyrus was in fact the inaugurator of what is now become known as the first Charter of Human Rights. And this Charter of Human Rights, the replica of it is found in the New York building of the United Nations building. And the original was only unearthed in the late 1800s by British archaeologists who were looking at the remains of the Babylonian Empire. And they found this now highly prized Cyrus cylinder, which represents the first Charter of Human Rights. And a study of this is very interesting, but we don't really have time to go into it in detail, but I would recommend that you look into it because it's absolutely fascinating. For the first time in our history, Cyrus gave freedom from slavery. He abolished slavery. And especially with regard to the Jews, whom he freed, and he sent back he allowed them freedom to go back to Jerusalem, and he rebuilt the temple for them that had been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And he actually restored many of the items that had also been stolen from that temple during that raid and that destruction. And he's mentioned several times in the Old Testament as the Savior, as the Messiah. He gave freedom of religion so that everyone could practice in their own temples. He gave freedom of movement of everyone within the empire. He established a state of unity in diversity, which had been unknown by all before that, because previously it had been domination of one race or one language and one religion on the others. He gave opportunities to women for leadership. He established systems of social security that had been unheard of. And these are some examples of the peaceful, as you can see, people holding hands, bringing plants, bringing peaceful presence to the presence of the Persian leadership. And when you look at the inspiration of Cyrus, this is one of the statements towards the end of the Cyrus cylinder, when you clearly see that Cyrus's source of inspiration was none other than the teachings of His Holiness Zoroaster, the spirit of purity. Ahura Mazda is the name, the title that is given to God, just like Allah or Messiah or Jehovah, that is given to God in various different traditions, or the creator in indigenous spirituality. He says, he prays to God that, that he may succeed in fulfilling his obligations to the nations of Persia, Babylon, and the ones of the four directions. May Ahura Mazda protect this land, this nation, from rancor, which is hatred, from foes, enemies, from falsehood, and from drought. And this was the glory of Persepolis. And of course, we know that as in common with most civilizations, after a few hundred years, when they forget that source of inspiration, when they forget those values upon which their great civilization was actually galvanized and motivated, when they forget those values, then all those civilizations are doomed to fail. And as the great contemporary historian has put it, Arnold Toynbee, his insights are to be studied, and many other historians have corroborated his insights and his findings and his conclusions about the study of the rise and fall of civilizations, that civilizations die by suicide, not murder, which is very different to what most people in every country, in every great civilization, want to blame the death of their civilizations on other people, on other powers, on foreign powers who've come and destroyed them. But the reason behind the fact that these civilizations died is because they lost those moral values of justice, of unity, of truthfulness, of compassion, those essential values that bring a civilization into being in the first place. And so they commit suicide. And this is exactly what happened to the great Persian civilizations. Both the religious and the secular leaders eventually became corrupted. As they gained more and more power, although it wasn't necessarily the power, it was the corruption as they lost sight of those eternal moral values, foundation values, which would have perpetuated and guaranteed the progress of their civilizations. When they forgot those, they collapsed, and they therefore committed suicide and was overtaken by other people who, came and destroyed, literally destroyed that civilization. Looking at the influence of Zoroaster in the Baha'i writings, it is said that but for the appearance of Zoroaster, Persia would have been totally effaced and destroyed. And were it not for the teachings of Zoroaster, the Persians would have vanished without a trace. Utterly deprived would they have been of the excellences of humanity, and entirely shut out, as by a veil, from the outpourings of heavenly grace. So we move now to a few considerations and reflections of Zoroastrian eschatology, which is about, life, about existence, about the end times, about the destiny of the human race. This is one of those fire temples in Persia. We won't go into many of these details of these prophecies, and this is for those who really want to study it in depth. However, as you know, in terms of prophecies, the Baha'i idea of prophecies is that, of course, for the manifestations of God, for these divine educators who have inspiration from the Creator, there is no past, present, and future. So they can see, they have innate knowledge of everything that has happened and everything that will happen in the future, where there is no space-time continuum, as in the spiritual world, as in the spiritual realm, these things do not matter. There is no matter, there is no space, there is no time. And so they have made invariably many of the, all of these spiritual educators, these prophets have made various different prophecies. However, some of them have been interpreted, can be interpreted in a much more literal way. Some have extremely metaphorical interpretations. Some of the prophecies seem to us as they're sort of catastrophic or cataclysmic in nature, like the sun will stand and the stars will fall from heaven, and there will be great moaning and there will be great cataclysms in the earth. And there are some that refer in a more literal way to the appearance of some of these of future educators, of future messengers. So there are several of these prophecies within Zoroastrian scripture, and from some of the kings, the Zoroastrian kings that have been recorded in history. So some of these we will just discuss. One of them is that the sun will stand still in the midst of the sky for 10 days and nights. And that at another time, later on from that, the sun will stand still for 20 days and nights in the midst of the sky. And then after that, in the time of Oshidar, who is actually the promised one of all ages, the sun will stand still for 30 days and nights in the midst of the sky. And we won't go into this. This is very sort of word intense, and I apologize for that. But we will go through it quickly just to refer to the fact that the Baha'i teachings claim to, the Baha'i revelation claims to fulfill these prophecies. And specifically with respect to some of these Zoroastrian prophecies, it is stated that the first dispensation to which it refers is the Mohammedan or the Islamic dispensation, during which the Sun of Truth stood still for 10 days. And each day is reckoned as 1 century. And the second dispensation referred to this prophecy is the one inaugurated by the Bab. And the Bab was the prophet herald of Baha'u'llah, the Bab meaning the gate of God to the new day of God. As to the third dispensation, the revelation proclaimed by Baha'u'llah, inasmuch as the Sun of Truth, when attaining that station, shines in the plenitude of its meridian splendor, its duration has been fixed for a period of 1 whole month, which is the maximum time taken by the sun to pass through the sign of the zodiac. So this is representative of the fact that the Sun of Truth has gradually risen throughout the ages, starting with the first streaks of the dawn, then gradually coming up with greater and greater and greater intensity until it stands at its noontide glory with the maximum splendor and power and energy, representing the level of energy and effulgence that is required for the time of the maturity of the human race, which we are about to witness, hopefully, not too far away. The second prophecy found in the Zoroastrian scripture is about the advent of a king called Shah Bahram, who is the Persian god of victory. He's a warrior ruler named by the Sasanian kings in 590 or 91, and also the reference to the son of Yazgerd, the third, who is the last Sasanian king. And this is found in this reference here, where it says that when 1,000 or so years have passed from the inception of the religion of the Arabian, that means Muhammad, the prophet founder of Islam, when 1,000 or so years have passed from the inception of the religion of the Arabian and the overthrow of the kingdom of Iran, that means the kingdom, of course, of the classic Persian kings, and the degradation of the followers of my religion, from us shall come forth, that means from the Persians, shall come forth that Shah Bahram, the glorious. Interestingly, Baha'u'llah's name means the glory of God. From the family of the Kayanites, who are the dynasty of the Persian kings. And this is a provisional translation. Here you will find the original. This is a provisional translation of this prophecy regarding the appearance of a new prophet from Iran. When wickedness shall appear in you, so talking to the Persians and the Persian kings, there shall appear from the Arab nation someone who has a strong tongue and who shall bring a religion which can be likened to a flowering tree with no thorns. And this is again similar to the previous reference to the advent of His Holiness Muhammad, the founder of Islam. And when 600 years are passed from his advent, half of the tree shall bear thorns and half shall bear flowers. And when 1,200 and some years have passed, basically from the inception of this Arabian religion, which is Islam, the tree will become all thorns and no flowers will be seen on it. Since no life remains in the world, I will raise up someone from your dynasty and will bestow religion and faith to him again. And as I said, Baha'u'llah claims to be the fulfillment of all of the previous religious dispensations and the promised one of all ages, representing the appearance of the Son of Truth at the time of the noontide glory, because this is the time of the maturity of the human race. We have to achieve unity, and that requires a great deal of help from above. So Baha'u'llah, in his explanation of this prophecy, to the questions put forth by the most renowned Zoroastrian leader, whose picture we'll see in a minute, he said that our books have announced that Shah Bahram will come, invested with manifold signs to guide the people aright. He actually asked Baha'u'llah, who is that? And Baha'u'llah stated, O friend, whatsoever has been announced in the books, the holy books, has been revealed and made clear. From every direction, the signs have been manifested. Beseech the peerless and incomparable Lord to bestow a penetrating insight upon his servants, for insight leads to true knowledge and is conducive to salvation. Were the children of men to gaze with the eye of understanding, they would see the world illumined with a new light in this day. Say the day star of knowledge is manifest, and the luminary of insight has appeared, referring to Baha'u'llah's own revelation. And one final prophecy is that there is a final battle that will take place between Ahura Mazda, the good, representing the good, and Ahriman, the devil. This is a pictorial sort of representation of the devil, who will have one final battle with the Ahura Mazda, the representation of God, the source of all good. And you know what? The good news is that this battle, this final battle, will be won by Ahura Mazda. And this in terms of its interpretation in real terms, means that the attainment of maturity within human relationships and on this earth is destined to occur, commensurate with the establishment of a lasting peace and justice on earth, which is equivalent with the establishment of a global civilization. And this, of course, is not a cataclysmic event. It is a process that will take centuries to come about. And just looking at the genealogy of Baha'u'llah, we don't have time really to go into it in detail. Suffice it to say that Baha'u'llah was born from one of the other brothers who had immigrated to Persia, descendant from Abraham, okay, who is the father of the nations. Because apart from Isaac and Ismail, Abraham had 6 sons who moved to Persia and the Afghan regions. And he had a 3rd wife called Keturah, and Zoroaster, who also descends from this lineage. And from Keturah are both the ancestors of Baha'u'llah. For those who like to look at this further, they could examine it, but we don't have time to go into it. And so Baha'u'llah had a direct connection with the Zoroastrian leaders of his time. This is the picture of Sepideh Taheri, a Parsi Zoroastrian scholar and civil rights activist. And the Parsis of those Zoroastrians who, after the conquest of Iran by Islam, many of them moved to East India. They already lived, several of them lived there already, but many of the Zoroastrians actually moved to East India, and they became known as the Parsis. And during the time of Baha'u'llah, one of these Parsis was asked, one of the most prominent Parsi leaders was asked to come to Iran and lead the Zoroastrian community there. And Manikchi Sahib directly came in contact with Baha'u'llah by posing many different questions to him. And Baha'u'llah answered his questions in what has now been translated into the English language from Persian in a compilation that is called The Tabernacle of Unity, and indeed forms one of the most important works of Baha'u'llah, which span over 100 volumes. And Baha'u'llah, addressing the high priests of the Zoroastrian faith, says that the incomparable friend is manifest. He speaks that wherein lieth salvation. Were ye, O high priest, to discover the perfume of the rose garden of understanding, you would seek none other but him, and would recognize in his new vesture the all-wise and peerless one, and would turn your eyes from the world and all who seek it, and would arise to help him. So Baha'u'llah addressed many leaders, both secular and religious leaders of his time, including the kings and emperors of the world, the Pope Pius IX of Christianity, but also the Zoroastrian kings. And we won't go into this, but these are some statements about the fulfillment of Zoroastrian prophecies specifically. But when we see that this age in which we live is an age when spirituality of people has been overcome by materialism, so that spiritual susceptibility seems to have vanished, and divine civilization has become decadent, and guidance of knowledge of God no longer remain. All are submerged in a sea of materialism. And during this time, we should be very open and investigate this new light that has appeared. I will finish with this prophecy of the great poet, Persian poet Ferdowsi, who wrote a prophecy that is very, very interesting, in consonance with the Zoroastrian prophecies, where he says that in the future there will come a renowned man from the land of the spear-raising riders, that is in Mazandaran, the area in which Baha'u'llah appeared, a pure, righteous man from whom the religion of God will spread to the four directions, in other words, to all the world. From him will the world become safe from evil. From his face will shine the glory of God, which is the title of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith. So your next question might be, did Zoroastrians recognize the appearance of Sir-Shams, or the Shah Bahram, the promised one of their religion? The answer is many of them did recognize Baha'u'llah. And in this audience, in fact, there may be many people who have come from Zoroastrian background. I would encourage you to go to the Baha'i website called www.baha'i.org to find out a bit more about the relationship between the Baha'i faith and all of the religions of the world, and about what Baha'is are building today, because this circle of unity has been drawn, and Baha'u'llah has made a design for uniting of all the peoples and for the gathering of them under the shelter of the tent of universal unity. And surely we, as concerned and thoughtful citizens of the world, must all strive with heart and soul until we have the reality of unity in our midst. And as we work, so will strength be given unto us. So let us look at this and come together in unity and examine and investigate this incredibly interesting phenomenon that has no reference points in our current and recent history. Thank you for your attention, dear friends.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taheri. This was a really interesting talk. So everyone can put their questions in the chat. We already have some questions. The first is, I've heard with no proof that some of the teachings of the Old Testament and New Testament came from Avesta, which contradicts with 1200 to 1400 BC of the time of Zardusht. Would you comment on that, please?
So what do they, yeah, so as I said, the the actual date of the appearance of Zoroaster is actually not entirely clear, although we do know that according to some references, he actually talked, Zoroaster traveled to the Holy Land and he talked to Isaiah. So it's interesting, I cannot comment on it because we really have to look at the exact timing of some of the appearance of some of these prophets, even in the Old Testament, even looking at the exact date of the appearance of the Old Testament prophets. This is a matter that has not been determined definitively by historians, and there's a lot of controversy about it. So what we can do is just give approximate times, and those approximate times vary at the moment. Maybe in the future, historians will discover further evidence to be able to, reduce that sort of limit of uncertainty about their exact timing. But beyond that, I cannot comment. I'm not a historian. I get my historian of religion per se, but basically doing these, some background look. That is where the controversies lie. No one can be absolutely certain. There are approximations.
The next question is, thank you for the information. Zoroaster was born about 3,500 years ago. How can one see his lineage up to the 1900s?
It's a matter of going into the genealogical evidence, and some of the historical evidence. So if you really want to sort of go into it, then you can. There is a very detailed genealogy that was made by a scholar, one of the great Persian scholars called Mirza Abul Fazl. Mirza Abul Fazl, who in fact became the secretary of that Zoroastrian leader, Manakji Sahib. He was one of the greatest geniuses that modern Persia has produced. Abul Fazl means the father of knowledge. And in fact, his title expanded to the father of knowledge and its mother. So he knew tons about all the various different religious histories. And he did a very detailed genealogy of Baha'u'llah. And I would refer you to that.
Is there any reference in Persian literature to the Zoroastrian Magi who discovered Jesus at the time of his birth?
Yes, so there is some, in fact, Magi, that whole word came from Majus, which is to do with Zoroastrian priests. And yes, there is some connection in there. Again, you have to dig into ancient historical references. And the evidence shows that those magi were actually Zoroastrian scientists and priests. And of course, the priestly class were always scientists. And in fact, the word magic comes from that same root, sort of knowing about astronomy, knowing about the movements of the stars, being able to interpret scripture. And so there is evidence, if you read ancient history, that the Magi were these Majus who came to give presents, came to Herod, actually. Initially, they came to Herod. And they said that we have calculated from the prophecies of our books that the appearance of the Messiah is about to happen. And Herod, that is why Herod was so worried, the king of the Jews. The king of the Jews was the Messiah, was supposed to have been born. And that is why Herod got so upset and so worried and angry that he didn't want to be overtaken by any other emperors or kings. And he certainly didn't want to acknowledge the coming of the Messiah. So that is why he ordered that the children, the boys of every single child that was born in that sort of area would be killed. And so and that is why Mary and Joseph had to actually escape and go into Bethlehem in hiding. In fact, actually, they had to go into Egypt for a while, and then afterwards they came, and when it was safe for them to return. And in fact, the wise men who came to, it's as is recorded in the Bible, who came to herald and give praise and give gifts to the baby Jesus were Zoroastrian Magi. And that shows, in fact, the unity of the religions, even though they were non-Semitic as in the traditional sense of the word, even though they were very sort of distant from each other in terms of their time of their appearance and so on. Yet you see how even the prophecies were in harmony, and how the Zoroastrian faith was in a way, related to Judaism and related to Christianity. The story is very interesting. I have to sort of stop myself from talking in too much detail because I know of the time, but yeah, for those who are interested, you can again look into it in much, much more detail.
Thank you. The next question is, can you please comment on the station of the famous mosque in the Mazar-e-Sharif in today's Afghanistan, which is known as the resting place of Zoroaster?
No, I can't comment on that. I don't know about that. Don't know much about the mosque, because again, the place of birth and death of Zoroaster are not absolutely known, right? The same with all of these Old Testament prophets. And when you're talking about like 3,000 years ago, okay, we do not have definite evidence for the, not yet anyway, maybe in the future we will, but these are speculative as far as I know, but I can't necessarily comment on it.
Could you please tell me where to find the detailed genealogy of Baha'u'llah?
Yes, I think a copy of it is actually at the beginning of the Dawnbreakers, but I could put it in the reference point. So on Bahá'íLibrary.com, there is a nice genealogical record as well. With some biblical references. There's a PDF of it available.
Right. Well, I think that's all of our questions for today. So thank you so much again, Dr. Taheri. We really appreciated this talk. It was very informative. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Very, very welcome. I was just going to say, yes, that it is in the Dawnbreakers. And in Bahá'íLibrary.com, there's a PDF, and in the original, in the introduction to Dawnbreakers.
Great. Thank you. Our speaker next week will be Rizwan Foxhall, and the topic will be how to raise children of the kingdom. So again, these talks are every Saturday at noon Eastern time, and I've put the link to our mailing list and our YouTube channel in the chat. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.